another chair for one of the chairmen. I'm bringing.
You don't mind seeing the ladies are not coming?
Maybe one day. I think the church and you can see
Give them a chance. Here she is, she comes by now. Oh my goodness.
There you go. Bye.
So 10 days from now you go under, right?
Yeah. Oh.
I've had that before. I've had that at St. John's, there's UCLA. And all it is you start counting backwards. You don't know what happens, and you wake up. That's all.
You have 2 or 1?
I should have had 2. I had 1 done. And it's really important to, well, they'll tell you. You told me to take this medication, which was pain medication. It was heavy, Vicodin, you know? And he said, don't neglect taking this. He says, and take it as it's prescribed. He says, if you think, oh, I don't feel anything, I don't need it. He said that if you start to feel pain, the stress from it won't allow you to heal. And so just see, and I was thinking, oh my God, because I'm a junkie now, so it's like usually if you take even once something and you go through all those drones, you know. But I took it for 2 weeks, and after I stopped, nothing, not one day. So, great, Krishna's.
And you enjoy the temple.
Is that how I became a devotee story?
No. How I
my joke.
I survived a hernia operation.
Oh. Should we start telling all of our surgery stories?
He's about to have one.
Yeah. Well, I already had 2. I told you that.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I had other things. See?
Old Men's Surgery Club.
Sorry about it. You already know it.
Can you check if the thing is correctly?
You want it perfectly centered?
Okay, that's okay.
Then it is.
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jutaha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaura Tishe Namaha Nityanandam Namastubhyam Premananda Pradayane Kalo Kalamashanashaya Janava Pataye Namaha. Ajanulambita Bujo Kanakavadato Samkirtanaika Pitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dvijavaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataro. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Jayatam Suruto Pango Mamamanda Materigati Matsarvasva Padambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpa Drumadha Srimad Ratanagar Sinhasanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prishtalibhi Sevyamano Smarami Shriman Rasarasaramhi Vam Shivata Tatakstitaha Karshan Venu Swanayir Gopir Gopinata Shriyeswara Brindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavasyacha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Astatara Sata Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Astatara Sata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj and Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Astatara Sata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And my Dandavat Pranams to the lotus feet of all of my Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga. And my Dandavat Pranams to all the Vaishnavas and to all of the Vaishnavis. We're on Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila chapter 16. The Lord's attempt to go to Vrindavan. We're nearing the latter part of the chapter. We're on text 194. Actually, we just heard the amazing pastime of how in the next province, as Mahaprabhu is leaving Orissa, and the Orissan government officers appointed by Maharaj Prataparuja were accompanying him, but from the point of this river crossing, then it goes into another province. So they made an arrangement to contact the king, or the Muslim king, who had a secretary that came in disguise. and scoped out the situation. And when that secretary returned back, then that secretary was overwhelmed because he had the darshan of Mahaprabhu and he was chanting Hare Krishna and he was very overwhelmed. And then he was telling that I think this personality is the supreme personality of Godhead. So it turned out that that king was a drunkard, a Muslim king. He was actually a drunkard. But he became so much affected by the report of the spy that he decided to come personally. And how did it go? There was also some message given to...
Didn't he go dressed as a Hindu, right?
Yeah, but there was a message given by... there was a message given by the Orion government official. They sent a message saying that they would like to discuss about Mahaprabhu's entering and what arrangements can be made. So anyway, it ended up that the king himself came with like 5 people and he was dressed as a Vaishnava. And what an amazing pastime where he personally got the darshan of Mahaprabhu. And then he began to lament and cry that why was I born in a Muslim family? Why couldn't I have been born in a Hindu family like this? And anyway, Mahaprabhu actually embraced him and gave him Krishna Prem, you know. And so then before the governor left, then the Mahapatra embraced him and offered him many gifts. He thus established a friendship with him. The Mahapatra means the government official from Orissa. Pratak kale se bahu nauka sajaya, Prabhu ke anite dilo vishvasa pataya. The next morning, the governor sent his secretary with many nicely decorated boats to bring Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the other side of the river. The Mahapatra crossed the river with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and when they reached the other shore, then the Muslim governor personally received the Lord and worshipped his lotus feet. One of the boats had been newly constructed, and it had a room in the middle of the boat. It was on this boat that they put Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. Finally, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bade farewell to the Mahapatra, and standing on the river bank and looking at the boat, the Mahapatra began to cry. The Muslim governor then personally accompanied Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because of pirates, the governor took 10 boats full of many soldiers. The Muslim governor accompanied Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu past Mantreshwar. This place was very dangerous due to pirates. He took the Lord to a place named Pichaladar, which was near Mantreshwar. Purport: the very wide mouth of the Ganga near present-day Diamond Harbor. It was called Mantreshwar. Through the Ganga, the boat entered the Rupnarayan River, and it reached the village of Pichaldar. Pichaldra and Mantreshwar are located very close together. And after passing Mantreshwar, the Muslim governor accompanied the Lord as far as Pichalda. So I'll tell my boat story. 6 months on the boat called Nitai Padakamalam, from Mayapur, going all the way down to the ocean, all the way to that island, Sagar Island. And there was a mela. Every year they have a mela there. It's kind of like Kumbh Mela. And then there's a bathing time, and the government takes part in constructing little simple cottages and all that. So we actually came on our boat. We had a Muslim boat captain. What was his name? I'll remember it after. And he brought 3 people from his village, which was right near to where the Ganga just like becomes, you can barely see across it, because the ocean, it comes right near to the ocean. That's that area that's being talked about right here, Diamond Harbor. And Yeah, so there's both stories connected with that.
Were you the, how many Westerners from?
Not many, maybe like 4. Yeah. So, finally, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bade the governor farewell. The intense ecstatic love exhibited by the governor cannot be described. This is the Muslim governor. Se kali tar prem chesta na pari varnita. I cannot even describe those symptoms of ecstatic love. In the purport, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bade farewell to the Muslim governor at Pichalda. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami herein states that the governor experienced symptoms of ecstatic love due to being separated from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. These symptoms, he admits, cannot be described. Alokik lila kore Sri Krishna Chaitanya, ye iha shune tar janma deha dhanya. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes are all uncommon. Whoever listens to his activities becomes glorious, and his life becomes perfect. The Lord finally reached Panihati, Raghava Pandit's place, Nityananda's Chiradahi festival there. So finally he reached Panihati, and as an act of mercy, he gave the captain of the boat one of his personal garments. Imagine having one of Mahaprabhu's personal garments, which was probably handed down in their family line for hundreds of years, and who knows what became of it. The place, called Panihati, was located on the bank of the Ganga. After hearing that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had arrived, all kinds of men assembled, both on the land and on the water. Raghava Pandit Asi Prabhu Loya Gela. At length, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taken away by Raghava Pandit. There was a great crowd assembled along the way, and the Lord reached Raghava Pandit's residence with great difficulty. Must have been lakhs of people. Ek din Prabhu Tata Korya Nivas. The Lord stayed at Raghava Pandit's place for only one day. The next morning he went to Kumarahata, where Srivas Thakur lived. Purport: the present name of Kumarahata is Hali Sahara. After Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted sannyas, Srivas Thakur left Navadvip due to separation from him. How can he stay in Navadvip? Mahaprabhu is not there. And then he went to Hali Sahara to live. From Kumarahata, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Kanchanapalli, also known as Kanchadapara, where Shivananda Sain lived. And after staying 2 days at Shivananda's house, the Lord went to the house of Vasudeva Datta. From there, he went to the western side of Navadvip, to the village called Vidyanagar. And from Vidyanagar, he went to Kuliagram and stayed at Madhavadasa's house. He stayed there 1 week, and he excused the offenses of Devananda and others. And due to Kaviraj Goswami's mentioning the name of Shantipur Acharya, some people think that Kulia is a village near Kanchanapara. This is in the purport. So due to this mistaken idea, they invented another place known as New Kuliyarpata. Actually, such a place does not exist. And leaving the house of Vasudeva Datta, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to the house of Advaita Acharya. And from there he went to the western side of Navadvip to Vidyanagar. And he stayed at the house of Vidya Vachaspati. These accounts are given in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Mangal, Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka, and Chaitanya Charita Kavya. 4. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has not vividly described this entire tour. Therefore, on the basis of Chaitanya Charitamrita, some unscrupulous people have invented a place called Kuliyarpata near Kanchanapara. Now, from the house of Srivas Thakur, the Lord went to the house of Shivananda Sain and then to the house of Vasudeva Datta. Then the Lord remained some time at the house of Vidyavachaspati, but then, because it was too crowded, he went to Kulia. So this is what's described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. That's one of my favorite parts of the Chaitanya Bhagavat. So this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's second time leaving Jagannath Puri. First time, he went to South India. And then came back, and his devotees kept him there for 2 years. Then he asked them permission, he wants to go to Vrindavan. So now he's on his way to Vrindavan. Actually, on this journey, he doesn't make it. He goes as far as Kanai Natashala, it's right near Ramakeli Gram, where he meets Rupan, Sanatan, and Anupam. And then Sanatan Goswami advises, better not to go, because by that time there were lakhs and lakhs of people. And in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, you just have to read it. It's the description of like lakhs and lakhs of people coming to see Mahaprabhu while he was staying there at this house, at the house of Vidyavachaspati. Yes. So, the Lord remained some time at the house of Vidyavachaspati, but then because it was too crowded, he went to Kulia. So that place in Kulia is going to be told here in the purport. But that's where all the lakhs of people came, and they were clamoring and calling out, they wanted to have his darshan. You know, it's described in Chaitanya Bhagavat that the whole Ganga was full of heads. People coming across the Ganga, full of heads. And they were coming across on anything they could hold on to. An overturned pot, a banana tree floating, whatever. And no one drowned. And even lame and blind people were coming, you know. And then it also describes that coming from all directions, you know, the word is there. Mahaprabhu is here in Navadvip. So they're coming by the millions. And they were even clearing forests along the way, just by the millions of people. So that very dramatic description is given in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. So the house, in the purport here it says, the house of Vidyavachaspati was located in Vidyanagar, which was near Koladvip, or Kulia. That's where our temple is. And Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj's temple in Koladvip, in that very area.
Do they know where the house of Vasudeva Dutt in Kulia was?
I never heard.
I never saw it.
Yeah. But it was here that Devananda Pandit was residing, and this information is found in the Chaitanya Bhagavat Madhya Kanda, chapter 21. In the Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka, the following statement is given about Kulia. It says, Tataha Kumara Hate Shrivas Pandit Vatyam Abhyayayo. So from there, the Lord went to the house of Shrivas Pandit in Kumarahata. Then it's got some more Sanskrit from the Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka, Tato Dvaita Vadim Abhyatya, etc. Then from the house of Shrivas Acharya, the Lord went to the house of Advaita Acharya, where he was offered obeisances by Haridas Thakur. Then the Lord took a boat to the other side of Navadvip to a place called Kulia, where he stayed 7 days at the house of Madhavadas. So that's where he stayed, in Kulia, in the house of Madhavadas, 7 days. He then proceeded along the banks of the Ganga. So that's being quoted here from the Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka. Then in the Chaitanya Charita Mahakavya, it is stated, Anye Dyu Sa Sri Navadvipa Bhume, in a long sentence. The Lord went to the western side of the Ganga at Navadvip, and everyone was pleased to see the Lord coming. Then, in the Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Antyakanda chapter 3, it is stated, Sarva Parishad Sanghe Sri Gaur Sundar Acham Bite Asi Uttarilo Tar Gar. The Lord suddenly came to Vidyanagar with a full party, and then he stayed there in the house of Vidyavachaspati. Navadvip Pari Vachaspati Gore Aila Nyasi Chudamani. Thus the chief of all the sannyasis, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he arrived at the house of Vidya Vachaspati. Then, as further stated, there's about, looks like about 20 shlokas that they quoted here this is from the Chaitanya Bhagavat. So here's the description. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed at Vidya Vachaspati's house, many hundreds of thousands of people went to see him and to chant the holy name of Hari. It was so crowded that people could not even find a place to walk. Therefore they made room by clearing out the jungles near the village. Many roads were automatically excavated, and many people also came by boat to see the Lord. So many came that it was difficult for the boatmen to get them across the river. When Vidya Vachaspati suddenly arrived, he made arrangements for many boats to receive these people. But the people would not wait for the boats. Somehow or other, they crossed the river and hurried toward the house of Vidya Vachaspati. Due to this great crowd, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu secretly went to Kulia Nagar. After the Lord left, and they were blaming, After the Lord left Vidyanagar, however, all the people heard news of his leaving. They then accompanied Vachaspati to Kulia Nagar. And since the news of the Lord's arrival was immediately broadcast, large crowds arrived and greeted Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with great jubilation. Indeed, when the crowd went to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it increased 10,000 times in number. No one could say how many people crossed the river to see him, but many hundreds of thousands made a great tumult when crossing the river Ganga. After crossing the river, everyone began to embrace one another because they heard the good news of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's arrival. And thus all the inhabitants of Kulia, the sinful, the intermediate, and the spiritually advanced, they were delivered and they glorified by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then in Chaitanya Bhagavat, another quote, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passed through Kanayoda, Baragachi, and Dogachia, and then crossed the Ganga before arriving in Kulia. Then from the Chaitanya Mangal, there's also a quotation, Ganga Snan Kori Prabhu Radha Desh Diya, Krame Uttarila Nagara Kulia, Mayara Vachane Puna Gela Navadvip, Varakona Gat Nijavadira Samipa. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this is the translation of that verse. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu walked through Radha Desh, and gradually he arrived at the Ganga. And after bathing in the river, he crossed it, and he went to Kulia. Because he had promised his mother he would return to Navadvip, he went to Varakona Ghat, a village near his house. So in the commentary of Prem Das, it is said, Nadiyar Majakane Sakala Lokete Jane Kulia Paharapur Name Stan. Everyone knows that in the middle of Nadia is a village named Kulia Paharapur. So Sri Narahari Chakravarti or Ganashyam Das has written in his Bhakti Ratnakara, Kulia Paharapur Deka Srinivas Purve Koladvip Parvatakya E Prachar. So he said, Oh Srinivas, just see the town of Kulia Paharapur, which was previously known as Koladvip. This is talking about where we live in Navadvip, Gurudev's temple. Then in a book named Navadvip Dham Parikrama, also written by Ganashyam Das, it is stated, Kulia Paharapur Gram Purve Koladvip Parvatya Kanandanam, that the town of Kulia Paharapur was previously named Koladvip Parvatakyananda, because it's Koladvip, forever, the 9 islands. So, but they changes names over time. Therefore, this is the end of this purport. Therefore, one can conclude that the present-day city of Navadvip and the place is known as Bahiradvip, Koler Ganja, Kola Amada, Koler Daha, Gadakali, etc. They were known as Kulia. But the so-called Kuliyar Pada is not the original Kulia. Somebody named it that. Probably they wanted to say, this is the original, just like the birthplace of Mahaprabhu. Somebody made that place on the wrong side of the Ganga.
Is this the time when Mahaprabhu forgave all of them?
Yes, yes. When he stayed at Madhava Das's house. And that area is directly in the same area where Devananda Gaudiya Mat, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat, that whole area there, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj told. This area here is called Aparad Bhyanjan Pat, the place where all the offenses were forgiven. Devananda Pandit and so many, right? And all the students and everyone that were blaspheming Mahaprabhu before he took sannyas and all of that. So everyone was forgiven there. So that's a very auspicious place. Aparad Bhyanjan Pat, where our mats are. Yes. So, here's a purport. Madhava Das Grihe Tata Shachira Nandan Laksha Koti Lok Tata Paila Darshan. When the Lord stayed at the house of Madhava Das, many hundreds of thousands of people came to see him. Now in the purport, Madhava Das is identified as follows. In the family of Shrikar Chattopadhyay, Yudhishthir Chattopadhyay took his birth. Formerly he and his family members lived in Bilva Gram and Patuli. From there he went to Kulia Paharapur, formerly known as Hadapur. The eldest son of Yudhishthir Chattopadhyay was known as Madhavadas. The second son was called Haridas, and the youngest son was called Krishna Sampati Chattopadhyay. The three brothers' nicknames were Chakadi, Tinakadi, and Dukadi. I love these Bengali names. The grandson of Madhavadas was named Vamshivadan, and during the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, some of Vamshivadan's descendants, including those of his grandson Ramachandra, were still living at Bhagnapara, Bainchi, and other places. Yeah. I remember reading this way back, 45 years ago. And so many names, so many villages, so many places. But now it's very relishable to read that because we're familiar, we've lived there, we've stayed there, and the fact that all of this historical documentation in the Shastras and the actual physical locations, right? It's there in the purports given by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Prabhupada is actually translating their purports here with all this information. Now, then the Lord stayed there at the home of who? Madhava Das. Yes. He stayed there for 7 days and he delivered Saba Aparadi Gane Prakare Tarila. He delivered all kinds of offenders and sinners. So after leaving Kulia, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited the house of Advaita Acharya at Shantipur. It was there that the Lord's mother, Sachi Mata, met him and was thus relieved of her great unhappiness. So that's not described here, but in the Chaitanya Bhagavat it is. So the Lord then visited the village known as Ramakeli and the place known as Kanai Natashala, and from there he returned to Shantipur. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed in Shantipur for 10 days. This has all been described very elaborately by Vrindavan Das Thakur. I will not narrate these incidents because they have already been described by Vrindavan Das Thakur. There is no need to repeat the same information, for such repetition would unlimitedly increase the size of this book. So, those narrations tell how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met the brothers Rupa and Sanatan, and how Nishringananda decorated the road. Remember that one? Nishringananda Brahmachari decorated the road in his mind. I have already described these in an earlier synopsis of this book, so therefore I will not repeat the narrations here. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned to Shantipur, Raghunath Das came to meet him. Two brothers named Hiranya and Govardhan, who were residents of Saptagram, they had an annual income of 1,200,000 rupees. Purport. So, you know, a rupee in those days could maintain an entire family easily for a whole month. You know? So Hiranya and Govardhan were inhabitants of Saptagram in the district of Hooghly. Actually, they were inhabitants not of Saptagram, but of a nearby village named Krishnapur. They took their birth in a big Kayastha family, and although their family title had not been ascertained, it is known that they came from an aristocratic family. The elder brother's name was Hiranya Majumdar, and the younger brother's name was Govardhan Majumdar. Shri Raghunath Das was the son of Govardhan Majumdar. Their family priest was named Balaram Acharya, who was a favorite of Haridas Thakur's. And the family's spiritual master was Yadunandan Acharya, a favorite of Vasudev Datta's. So the village of Saptagram is located on the eastern railway from Calcutta to Burdwan. And presently the railway station is called Trisha Bigha. In those days there was a large river there known as the Saraswati, and present day Trisha Bigha is a great port. In 1592, the Patanas invaded, and due to a flooding of the Saraswati River in the year 1632, this great port was partially destroyed. It is said that in the 7th and the 18th centuries, Portuguese businessmen used to come aboard their ships. In those days, Saptagram, situated on the southern side of Bengal, was very rich and popular. The merchants, who were principal residents, they were called Saptagram Suvarnavaniks. There were very many rich people there. Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Girinha Shri Shri Radha Govinda Jiu Ki Jai. Yes. So in those days, Saptagram, situated on the southern side of Bengal, was very rich and very popular. The merchants, who were the principal residents, they were called Saptagram Suvarnavaniks. There were very many rich people there, and Hiranya Majumdar and Govardhan Majumdar belonged to the Kayastha community. They also were very rich, so much so that it is mentioned in this verse that their annual income as landlords amounted to 1,200,000 rupees. In this connection, one may refer to Adi Leela, chapter 11, verse 41, which describes Udaran Datta, who also belonged to the Saptagrami Suvarnavanik community. Mahaishvarya Yukta Dunhe Vadanya Brahmanya. Both Hiranya Majumdar and Govardhan Majumdar were very opulent and magnanimous. They were all well-behaved and devoted to Brahminical culture. They belonged to an aristocratic family, and among religionists, they were predominant. Practically all the Brahmins residing in Nadia were dependent on the charity of Hiranya and Govardhan, who gave them money, land, and villages. Purport: although Navadvip was very opulent and populous during Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, practically all the Brahmins depended on the charity of Hiranya and Govardhan. Because the brothers highly respected the Brahmanas, they very liberally gave them money. Nilambar Chakravarti, the grandfather of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was much worshipped by the two brothers, but Nilambar Chakravarti used to treat them as his own brothers. Formerly, these two brothers had rendered much service to Mishra Purandara, the father of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Did you know that? Jagannath Mishra is also called Mishra Purandar. And these two brothers had rendered so much service to him. And because of this, the Lord knew them very well. Raghunath Das was the son of Govardhan Majumdar. And from childhood, he was uninterested in material enjoyment. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned to Shantipur, after accepting the renounced order, Raghunath Das met him. When Raghunath Das went to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he fell at the Lord's lotus feet in ecstatic love. Showing him mercy, the Lord touched him with his feet. Raghunath Das's father, Govardhan, always rendered much service to Advaita Acharya, and consequently Advaita Acharya was very pleased with the family. When Raghunath Das was there, Advaita Acharya favored him by giving him the food remnants left by the Lord. And Raghunath Das was thus engaged for 5 or 7 days in rendering service to the Lord's lotus feet. After bidding farewell to Raghunath Das, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned to Jagannath Puri. That was the end of the journey. And after returning home, Raghunath Das became mad with ecstatic love. Raghunath Das used to run away from home again and again to go to Jagannath Puri, but his father kept binding him and bringing him back. His father even had 5 watchmen guard him day and night. 4 personal servants were employed to look after his comfort, and 2 brahmanas were employed to cook for him. In this way, 11 people were incessantly keeping Raghunath Das under control. Thus, he could not go to Jagannath Puri, and because of this, he was very unhappy. And when Raghunath Das learned that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had arrived at Shantipur, he submitted a request to his father. Raghunath Das asked his father, "Please give me permission to go see the lotus feet of the Lord. If you do not, my life will not remain within this body." Hearing this request, Raghunath Das's father agreed, and giving him many servants and materials, the father sent him to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, requesting him to return soon. For 7 days, Raghunath Das associated with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Shantipur. And during those days and nights, he had the following thoughts. Raghunath Das thought, "How shall I be able to get free from the hands of the watchmen? How shall I be able to go with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Nilachala?" Since Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was omniscient, he could understand Raghunath Das's mind. The Lord therefore instructed him with the following reassuring words. "Stira hoya gare jao nahao batul, krame krame pai lok bhava sindhu kul." That's a famous quote. "Be patient and return home. Don't be a crazy fellow. By and by, you will be able to cross the ocean of material existence." Now, purport. In the Srimad Bhagavatam it is stated 10:14:58. This is the one that Prabhupada would quote very often. You'll notice the last line. "Samashritaye padapallava plavam mahat padam punya yasho murare bhavam buddhir vatsa padam param padam 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 yad vipadam natesha." So, this material world is just like a big ocean. It begins with Brahmalok, and it extends to Patalalok, and there are many planets or islands in this ocean. Not knowing about devotional service, the living entity wanders about this ocean, just as a man tries to swim to reach the shore. Our struggle for existence is similar to this. Everyone is trying to get out of the ocean of material existence. One cannot immediately reach the coast, but if one endeavors, he can cross the ocean by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. One may be very eager to cross this ocean, but he cannot attain success by acting like a madman. He must swim over the ocean very patiently and intelligently under the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or his representative. And then, one day, he will reach the shore and return home back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. So then Mahaprabhu told Raghunath another famous one. Mar Katha Vairagya na karo, lok dekaya, jata jogya vishay bunja anasakto haya. You should not make yourself a show-bottle devotee and become a false renunciant. For the time being, enjoy the material world in a befitting way and do not become attached to it. Purport. Yep, I knew this was going to be an extensive, but not too long. Purport. So, the word Marakata Vairagya, indicating false renunciation, is very important in this verse. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in commenting on this word, he points out that monkeys make an external show of renunciation by not accepting clothing and by living naked in the forest. In this way, they consider themselves renunciates, but actually they are very busy enjoying sense gratification with dozens of female monkeys. Such renunciation is called Markata Vairagya, the renunciation of a monkey. And just to add a little, we live on the rooftop of Rup Sanatan Gaudiya Math, and we observe the monkeys every day in Vrindavan. And, you know, I've seen them through the various seasons, especially in the winter. It becomes very cold. And some, you know, they use different rooftops on different nights because they don't have any place. They never build a house. They're so renounced. But all day long, what are they doing? Stealing and looking for sex life with any other female monkeys. But they're very renounced. And what they do is they huddle together their bodies on the coldest nights of the winter on the rooftop there, you know. So he says, one cannot be really renounced until one actually becomes disgusted with material activity and sees it as a stumbling block to spiritual advancement. Yes. One time, we were in Holland with Gurudev. This was 2005. Gurudev had arrived there for his one-week festival. It was at that time that Gurudev was informed that one of his young sannyasis had left here in Los Angeles and trying to trace where he went and so forth. So Srila Gurudev was grave. He didn't say anything at that point. But then he asked us a question on the morning walk. He asked a few of the senior men, and he said, who can tell what is the main number one quality requirement, you know, of a sannyasi? Main one. 4 different devotees were trying to tell. Then he came to me and said, you can tell? I said, yes, Gurudev, I can tell, because at my sannyas ceremony in 2002, 3 years before, you read it personally, in public. There was at Devananda Gaudiya Math, and, you know, there were throngs of people, thousands of people there on Gaur Purnima Day in the morning time when he was giving our dandas and so forth. There was only two of us, myself and our Drishtadumna Prabhu. So Gurudev actually read from the book that's used, I can't remember the name, it's used, this book, small, imprinted in Bengali and so forth, and it's used for the various samskara ceremonies, you know. So there was like 2 pages of that book, small, about the qualifications of a sannyasi. So I told Gurudev, yes, I can say, because I remember, when you read that book, what was the main qualification of sannyasi? So I said, then tell. So then I told that it was told there in the book that the main qualification of sannyasi can be understood by the example of a person who has eaten some food and it hasn't digested properly, and now there's very great pain in the belly. Very great pain. And in order for him to get relief, he vomits. Right? And in the same way, that example is used that the jiva in this world, when he has fully understood and experienced, not just understood, but experienced also, what is that pain of suffering that comes from the attempt to try to enjoy in this world, and because of that pain he vomits, that means he renounces, he gives up. That is the main qualification of a sannyasi. Gurudev said, yes, that is correct. So Mahaprabhu is telling Raghunath Das Goswami that don't be a Marakata Vairagi. So because one cannot be really renounced until one actually becomes disgusted with material activity. Disgusted. And he sees it as a stumbling block to spiritual advancement. Yeah, stumbling block. Renunciation should not be falgu, meaning temporary, but it should exist throughout one's life. Temporary renunciation, or monkey renunciation, is like the renunciation one feels at a cremation ground. When a man takes a dead body to the crematorium, he sometimes thinks, this is the final end of the body. Why am I working so hard day and night? Such sentiments naturally rise in the mind of any man who goes to a crematorial ghat. However, as soon as he returns from the cremation grounds, he again engages in material activity for sense enjoyment. And this is called smashana vairagya, or marakata vairagya. So in order to render service to the Lord, one may accept necessary things. If one lives in this way, he may actually become renounced. So in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu it is said, Yavata syat svanirvaha Svikuryat tavad artavit adikye nyunatayamcha chyavate paramartata. Quote, the bare necessities of life, they must be accepted. Bare necessities. But one should not superfluously increase his necessities, nor should they be unnecessarily decreased. One should simply accept what is necessary to help one advance spiritually. In the Durgama Sangamani, Sri Jiva Goswami comments that the word sva nirvaha actually means sva sva bhakti nirvaha, means the experienced devotee, he will accept only those material things that will help him render service to the Lord. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Marakata Vairagya or Falgu Vairagya is explained as follows. Prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastuna mumukshubi parityago vairagyam falgu katyate. These are the 2 verses composed by Rupa Goswami about what is false renunciation and what is true renunciation. And the next one is anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjata nirbandha krishna sambandhe yukta vairagyam uchate. Yukta vairagyam. This is the verse about yukta vairagyam. and the other is about Falgu Vairagyam. So, the word Markata Vairagya is used by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to indicate so-called Vaishnavas who dress themselves in loincloths trying to imitate Srila Rupa Goswami. And such people, they carry a bead bag and they chant, but at heart, they are always thinking about getting women and money. Unknown to others, these Markata Vairagis maintain women, but externally present themselves as renunciates. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very much opposed to these Markata Vairagis or pseudo Vaishnavas. So, in that way, Mahaprabhu instructed Raghunath Das Goswami, and he told him, within your heart, you should keep yourself very faithful, but externally you may behave like an ordinary man, and thus Krishna will soon be very pleased, and he will deliver you from the clutches of Maya. So we'll read the rest of that pastime.
A humorous story.
Well, one second. We'll read the rest of that pastime the day after tomorrow. Yes, because tomorrow Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj's disappearance day. Yeah.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but Prabhupada told the story about these ladies who used to go and try to get sannyasis to fall down.
Yeah.
And then there was a group of men who dressed up as sannyasis.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah, I remember. Right. Hare Krishna. Okay, Shri Chaitanya Charitamritam ki jai, Shri Sachinandana Gaura Hari ki jai. Jai Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu's journey to Vrindavan ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi Vancha Kalpadurubhascha Vivasin